The estate attorney slid the document across the conference table without looking at her. "Sign here," he said. "And here." Claire Maddox looked at the paper. She had been looking at papers like this for 11 months, insurance forms, utility transfers, her mother's credit card applications, her sister's tuition invoices, and she had signed all of them because her mother had handed them to her in the middle of something else, the way you hand a person a bag to hold while you reach for your keys. This one was different. She could see it was different because her mother's attorney, not the family's attorney, she noticed now. Her mother's had not let her read it before sliding it forward. And because her sister Danielle was sitting at the far end of the table with her hands folded and her eyes on the window, which was where Danielle looked when she already knew the ending of something, Claire set down her pen. "I'd like to read it first," she said. The silence that followed was the specific silence of people who had not planned for that answer. The morning her father's estate attorney called, Claire was on her knees in the garage, scrubbing motor oil off the concrete floor because her mother had mentioned 3 days ago and in passing that it bothered her. That was how most things got done in the Maddox house. Someone mentioned they were bothered. Claire heard it. The thing got done. She had been hearing things and doing them for 14 months, since the Tuesday afternoon in October when her father's Silverado had crossed the center line on Farm Road 217 outside of Waco, Texas, and Douglas Maddox had died before the ambulance reached him. She had driven home from Austin that night, from the apartment she'd shared with 2 roommates and the paralegal job she'd taken after dropping out of UT Law, and she had walked into a house full of neighbors and casseroles, and her mother sitting at the kitchen table with the specific blankness of someone whose structural system had just been removed from beneath them. She had not gone back to Austin. That was not a decision she had made so much as a decision that had been made around her, the way weather happens. Danielle, her younger sister, was a junior at Texas A&M. She had finals. She had a boyfriend. She had the particular immunity of someone whose future was still being built and therefore could not be interrupted. Their mother, Patricia Maddox, had always been capable and organized in the way that women are capable and organized. When a capable and organized man is handling the load they cannot see, and without Douglas, the invisible architecture of the household had simply collapsed, and Claire had stepped into the gap because there was no one else, and because someone had to. 14 months later, she was scrubbing concrete at 7 in the morning when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize, Waco area code, professional voicemail voice. And she sat back on her heels and listened to Howard Greer, attorney at law, inform her that he was handling the final administration of her father's estate and had a matter to discuss with her directly. Directly. She had turned that word over while she stripped off her rubber gloves. Not with the family. Not at a meeting her mother would schedule. Directly. With her. She called back from the driveway, standing in the cold November light with her breath making small clouds. "Miss Maddox," Howard Greer said, and his voice had the careful quality of a man choosing every word with awareness of its weight. "I want to start by saying that I've been handling estate matters in McLennan County for 22 years. I take my obligations to my clients seriously." A pause. "Your father was my client. I want you to understand that distinction." "I understand it," Claire said. "Good. I need to speak with you in person. Are you available this week?" She looked at the house. Through the kitchen window she could see her mother in her robe, moving toward the coffee maker with the slow, deliberate movements of a woman who had decided grief entitled her to a certain pace. Inside the house there were 3 loads of laundry that needed folding, a plumber scheduled for Thursday, 2 weeks of her mother's medical reimbursement forms that no one had filed, and a casserole dish she had promised to return to the Hendersons 3 weeks ago and kept forgetting. "Yes," Claire said, "I can come to you." She told her mother she had an errand in Waco. Her mother said, "Pick up the dry cleaning while you're there," and handed her a ticket without looking up from her phone. Claire took the ticket. She went to Waco. Howard Greer's office was in a low brick building on Washington Avenue, the kind that had been there long enough to look permanent. His assistant, a woman in her 60s, who introduced herself only as Mrs. Paulson, brought Claire coffee without asking how she took it and set it down with the particular gentleness of a person who has been in proximity to difficult things for a long time and has learned how to be useful without making them worse. Greer himself was in his late 50s, slight, with wire-rimmed glasses and the look of a man who had spent decades being the bearer of complicated news and had made his peace with it. He stood when Claire came in. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. He did not ask how she was doing. She appreciated that. "Your father came to me in January of last year," Greer said, 8 months before the accident. He wanted to update his estate plan. He had concerns. He set his glasses on the desk, picked them up again. "He didn't tell me everything. Men of his generation often don't, but he told me enough that I want to make sure you understand what he actually left." Claire set her coffee down. "I thought I knew," she said. "Mom handled everything after. There was a meeting, an attorney." "There was your mother's attorney," Greer said, "Gerald Watts. He handled the probate filing. What he filed was," he paused, "technically complete." Technically complete. She had learned enough in 2 years of law school to know what that phrase cost a careful man to say. "What wasn't in it?" she asked. Greer opened a folder. He placed 3 documents on the desk, spaced apart, the way you lay out cards when the hand matters. Her father, he explained, had maintained a separate investment account at Lone Star Capital Management, not the joint account with her mother, a separate one, opened in his name alone in 2009. He had designated Claire as the sole beneficiary. The account, at the time of his death, held just under $90,000. Claire sat very still. "There's more," Greer said. Her father had also named her as the beneficiary of a life insurance rider, a supplemental policy, separate from the main family policy that had paid out to her mother. The rider was through a different carrier. Its value was $40,000. Her mother had filed the main policy claim within 6 weeks of the accident. The rider Claire had never been informed it existed. "She would have known about it," Claire said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. "The policy was in your father's papers," Greer said carefully. "The papers were in the home office. Your mother had access to the home office." Claire thought of the home office. She thought of the Tuesday 3 weeks after the funeral when her mother had said the room was too painful to go into, and could Claire please box up the files for the accountant. She thought of spending 4 hours doing exactly that, methodically, folder by folder. She thought of handing her mother a box, and her mother saying, "I'll deal with it when I'm ready," and the box disappearing into the guest room closet where Claire had not been asked to go since. "What do I do?" Claire said. It wasn't exactly a question. "There's a process," Greer said. He looked at her directly, not with pity, which she would have resented, but with the steady regard of a man who has decided to give someone the complete picture rather than the manageable version. It involves documentation, a formal claim with the insurance carrier, and potentially a civil filing depending on what the investigation turns up. He paused. "It's not simple. It will become known." "Known how?" "Within the family. Eventually, depending on what we find, potentially in the county court record." He held her gaze. "I want you to understand that before we go further," Claire thought about 14 months. She thought about the dry cleaning ticket in her coat pocket. She thought about the concrete floor and the rubber gloves, and the way her mother had said it bothers me from across the room without looking up. "Tell me the process," she said. She was home by 3. She returned the dry cleaning. She folded the laundry. She started dinner before her mother came downstairs and asked what smelled good, and Claire said chicken, and her mother said wonderful, and nothing in the exchange was any different from any of the 414 dinners that had come before it. But Claire, standing at the stove with a wooden spoon and the quiet, deliberate face of a woman who has just understood the shape of something, was not the same woman who had left that morning. She was good at not showing things. She had been practicing for 14 months. She was, it turned out, very good at it. After dinner, she went to her room, the room that had been hers in high school, the one she had moved back into without being asked and without asking, the one with the twin bed and the shelf of books she'd left behind when she went to Austin and had never gotten around to taking back, and she sat at the desk and opened her laptop and pulled up the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, which she had not read in 2 years, but which came back to her with the specific clarity of information that was once urgently necessary. Her father had trusted Howard Greer to protect what was hers. She was going to honor what her father had intended, even if no one else in this house ever would. She was not going to cry about it. She was going to count. The family financial advisor was named Roy Desmond, and he had been Douglas Maddox's advisor for 11 years and Patricia Maddox's advisor for 14 months, and he had an office in a glass building off I-35 that smelled like new carpet and the kind of measured optimism that comes standard with investment portfolios and conservative growth projections. Claire met him on a Thursday, after the plumber, before picking up Danielle from the Waco Greyhound station because Danielle was coming home for the long weekend and had not mentioned this until the Tuesday before. She had not told her mother about the meeting with Roy Desmond. She had not told her mother about Howard Greer. She had framed the Thursday as a personal errand, which was the kind of explanation her mother accepted without follow-up because her mother's model of Claire did not include personal as a meaningful category. Claire's errands were always for the household. That was what Claire was for. Roy Desmond was a man in his early 60s with a good tan and the relaxed confidence of someone who had never had to be careful about what he signed. He shook her hand when she came in and said he'd been sorry to hear about her father and offered her water, which she accepted. And then she sat across from his desk and told him she was reviewing her father's financial records as part of a formal estate inquiry, and she needed access to the account statements from the Lone Star Capital Management account for the past 3 years. Roy Desmond's hand paused over his keyboard. That account, he said, was closed in February. Claire looked at him. By whom? Your mother presented authorization as executor. He said it in the careful tone of someone who is not certain the ground beneath a sentence will hold. She is the executor of record. She is an executor, Claire said. My father's estate plan designated me as a co-executor. That designation was part of a document filed with his estate attorney, Howard Greer, in January of last year. She held Roy Desmond's gaze. Was she aware of that when she presented authorization? Roy Desmond had the expression of a man who was beginning to understand that his Thursday had just become considerably more complicated. I would have needed to confirm that with the estate filing, he said finally. Did you? A pause that was its own answer. What I need, Claire said, keeping her voice even, is documentation of the closure, what was withdrawn, where it was transferred, the date, and the authorization chain. I have a right to that documentation as co-executor. If there's any difficulty obtaining it, I can have my attorney make a formal request, but I'd prefer to resolve this directly. She did not yet have an attorney in the formal sense. She had Howard Greer, who had agreed to advise her through the investigation. She had 2 years of law school and 14 months of having nothing to do in the evenings but read, which she had used, mostly, to get through a box of her father's books that she'd taken from the office before her mother could direct her to put them in storage. Roy Desmond made copies. He handed them to her in a manila envelope and did not look entirely at ease about doing it. She sat in her car in the parking lot and went through the documents. $91,412 had been withdrawn from the Lone Star account in 2 transfers. The first, $50,000, in February, the month her mother had closed it. The second, the remaining balance, in April. Claire cross-referenced what she knew about the family's expenses since the accident. Danielle's tuition for the spring semester of her junior year had been paid in March. The kitchen had been renovated in April, new countertops, new appliances, the sub-zero refrigerator her mother had been wanting for 4 years. The family's car, a 2011 Acura that had been showing its age, had been replaced in May with a 2019 model. She was good at numbers. Her father had been good at numbers, and he had made sure she was 2 Saturday mornings when she was 12, sitting at this same kitchen table that no longer existed because it had been replaced with quartz and a farmhouse sink, working through the family budget line by line. You need to understand where things go, he had told her. Money that isn't tracked is money that disappears. She sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Then she picked up Danielle from the Greyhound station. Her sister came down the steps of the bus with a rolling suitcase and a new jacket, dark green, expensive looking, the kind that showed up in catalogs, and her phone in her hand, texting someone. She hugged Claire with the easy affection of a person who had not spent 14 months doing the invisible work that kept the other person's life running, which was to say with no particular awareness that anything required acknowledgement. "Mom says the kitchen is finished," Danielle said, dropping into the passenger seat. "I'm excited to see it." "It's nice," Claire said. "She said you picked out the countertops." "She asked me to." Danielle glanced at her with the brief, unfocused assessment of someone checking whether a response requires engagement. Claire's face offered nothing. Danielle looked back at her phone. "Did she tell you Marcus is coming for Christmas?" Danielle said. Marcus was her boyfriend, a third year at A&M Agricultural Engineering. He was pleasant, unremarkable, and had the particular confidence of a man who has always been welcomed wherever he arrived. "She's already talking about where to put him." "The guest room," Claire said. "She wants to give him the good guest room, which means moving the boxes, your father's boxes, to storage." Danielle said it with the breezy certainty of someone relaying information rather than asking a question. She said, "You'd handle it." The boxes in the guest room were the boxes Claire had packed from the home office 14 months ago. The boxes she had handed to her mother, and her mother had said, "I'll deal with it when I'm ready." The boxes she now understood, with the specific cold clarity of a woman who has spent a morning cross-referencing financial documents, had never been opened. "Sure," Claire said. Her voice was exactly the same as it had always been. She had practiced even for 14 months. She was very, very good at it. That evening, Patricia Maddox made a point of showing Danielle every element of the renovated kitchen with the pride of authorship. And Danielle said the countertops were gorgeous, and Patricia said Claire helped choose them, in the tone she used when she was being generous about someone's contribution to her project, warmly, efficiently, the way you credit a contractor. "She's very capable," she said to Danielle. "We couldn't manage without her." Claire stood at the edge of the kitchen and felt the sentence land, and felt the way it erased the difference between choosing and being chosen, between helping and being used, between a daughter and a function. And she felt the cold, steady anger she had been carrying since that morning in Waco become something harder and more deliberate, the way water becomes ice when the temperature has been dropping long enough. She went to bed at 10. She did not sleep. She lay in the twin bed in the room that was supposed to be temporary, with the document from Roy Desmond's office folded in the spine of a law textbook on her desk, and she thought through everything she knew and everything she suspected, and everything she still needed to confirm. She made a list. Then she made a second list, what needed to happen, in what order to protect the case, before her mother understood what was coming. And then, because she was practical, and had been raised by a practical man, she fell asleep. She woke at 5:30 with the particular clarity of someone who has solved a problem in their sleep and simply needs to get up and begin. She found the insurance policy 3 days later. Not the main policy that one had been filed and paid out within 6 weeks of the accident, $80,000 to Patricia Maddox as beneficiary, which was correct, which was what Douglas had intended. The rider was the supplemental policy, the $40,000 one that named Claire. She found it in the second box in the guest room, the one under the one that had her father's tax files, inside a manila folder labeled Insurance Misc, in her father's precise, slightly cramped handwriting. The kind of handwriting that belonged to a man who wrote a great deal and had opinions about the correct size of letters. She sat on the floor of the guest room for a moment with the policy in her hands. The policy had been issued in 2011. Her father had added the rider 3 months after Claire started law school. It had been renewed every year since. The beneficiary designation was unambiguous. Claire Ann Maddox, sole beneficiary. She photographed every page on her phone. She put the folder back exactly where she had found it, between the tax files and a folder of property records. She repacked the box. She went back to the kitchen and made dinner and said nothing. That night, she emailed Howard Greer with the policy details and asked him how quickly they could file the claim. His reply came at 6 the next morning. "This changes the picture considerably. Come in Monday. Bring the photos. Also, there's something else I found in your father's records I think you need to see." She sat in the kitchen with her coffee and read the email 3 times. Around her, the house was quiet. Through the window, the November sky was doing its flat gray Texas thing, enormous and indifferent. She thought about her father. She thought about the fact that he had added the rider 3 months after she started law school had gone, specifically to his insurance carrier, and designated her, his eldest daughter, the one with the careful mind and the patience for fine print, as the person who should receive something directly, not through the family account. To her, he had known. Not everything, but enough. Enough that he had started building structures she would only need if something went wrong. "Don't let anyone make you small," he had once told her, not in a letter, but standing in this same kitchen during her freshman year of college, when she had come home for Thanksgiving with a B- in contracts and a professor's comment that she was too quiet in seminar. He had said it the way he said most things that mattered, without decoration, without preamble, just the sentence, handed to her like a tool. She had not understood then how much she would need it. Howard Greer's office on Monday morning had a second chair pulled up to the desk, and 3 documents laid out in a row, and the expression of a man who had spent the weekend learning things that made him feel progressively worse about what he had and hadn't done in the months following Douglas Maddox's death. "Sit down, Claire," he said. She sat. She was not going to make this easy by asking questions before he was ready. She waited. It was something she was good at. "Your father," Greer said, "had a real estate holding I did not know about until I started digging last week." He placed a document in front of her, a deed, filed with McLennan County in 2008, a commercial lot on the south side of Waco. Warehouse District. He bought it for $60,000, used it for storage for one of his supplier contracts. The deed names you as the inheriting party in the event of his death. He paused. "I should have found this sooner. I didn't because his estate filing the one Watts handled listed his assets as complete without it." "Without the lot," Claire said. "Without the lot, the omission could have been an oversight." Greer's voice said he did not believe it was an oversight. Given the current value of Warehouse District property in McLennan County, he placed a second document beside the first, an appraisal. She looked at the number, $112,000. She sat with all of it for a moment, the Lone Star account, the insurance rider, the commercial lot. Her father had been careful, methodical, the way careful, methodical men are when they have understood something about the future and decided not to leave it entirely to chance. And every structure he had built had been quietly removed or ignored or misfiled one at a time over 14 months, while she folded laundry and scrubbed concrete and carried the household on a back no one had thanked. The number inside her chest, the one she had been adding to since Greer's first call, was becoming very large and very cold. "What is the legal exposure?" she said. "Civil, primarily." Greer leaned forward. "The insurance rider is the clearest. It's a direct claim with a named beneficiary. The carrier should pay out with the policy documentation. If there's resistance, we file and we'll win. The investment account closure is more complex. Your mother had executor authority, but only co-executor authority, and acting unilaterally to close an account with a designated beneficiary is by." He chose his words. "Problematic. The lot is a separate matter. Watts may have missed it genuinely, or he may have been directed to file incomplete. Either way, we can petition for a corrected estate accounting." "How public does this get?" Greer looked at her steadily. "The insurance claim is private. The civil petition for the estate accounting becomes county court record. Anyone who wants to look can find it." He paused. "Your sister will know. Your mother will know. The family circle will know eventually. These things travel." "I know," Claire said. "You understand the social." "Mr. Greer." Her voice was still even. 14 months of even. She was the best in the world at even. "I have been managing my family's household since the week my father died. I have filed their medical claims and paid their utilities and managed their renovation contractors and cooked their dinners and signed their documents. I have done this without pay, without acknowledgement, and without my own financial resources, which my mother has had access to without my knowledge for over a year." She set her hands flat on the desk. "I am not concerned about the social consequences. I am concerned about the truth." Greer was quiet for a moment. Then, with the expression of a man who has been waiting for someone to say that, "Good, then let's talk about timeline." She was out of his office by 11. She stood on Washington Avenue in the November cold and breathed. Then she turned and walked half a block to the coffee shop she had passed on the way, in a narrow place called Lark's, with fogged windows and the smell of dark roast, and she sat in the corner booth and ordered coffee and opened the notebook she'd brought and wrote for 40 minutes, because she needed to put everything in order, and her mind did that better when her hand was moving. She was on the second cup when the booth across from her was taken by a man who apologized for the crowded room, set his laptop bag down with the ease of someone who eats alone often, and glanced at the notebook in front of her with the quick, non-invasive assessment of a person who reads and recognizes when someone else is doing serious thinking. "Sorry," he said. "Ignore me." "I was planning to," she said, which was not unfriendly, just honest, and he smiled slightly at the precision of it and opened his laptop and left her alone. His name, she would learn later, was Ben Hartley. He was 36, a civil engineer with the county infrastructure office, and he had the quality she would come to recognize over subsequent weeks as simply how he was: steady, observant, not given to filling silence with noise for the sake of having made noise. He noticed she was working on something serious, and he did not ask what it was. He bought her a third cup of coffee when she'd been sitting there 2 hours, placed it on the edge of the table without comment, and when she looked up, he said only, "You look like someone who's been here long enough to need it." She had laughed. It was the first time she had laughed at anything she had to think about it a while. She did not think about him on the drive home. She had too much else to think about. But she thought about that small, specific thing, a cup of coffee placed without demand or explanation by someone who had simply noticed she might need it in the weeks that followed, when the things that were coming began to arrive. Her mother found the notebook on a Wednesday evening. Not the legal notebook that one lived in Claire's bag, which Claire carried everywhere now with the awareness of someone who understands that paper can be moved. The household notebook, the one Claire kept with the running domestic accounts, grocery budgets, contractor invoices, utility records, the one her mother had never looked at because her mother did not look at the mechanism of a thing if the thing was working. Her mother looked at it now. Claire was in the laundry room when she heard the footsteps, too fast, too deliberate, with the specific tempo of a woman who has found something and is carrying it at speed. Patricia Maddox came into the laundry room with the notebook open to the budget page, and her face, wearing the expression Claire had seen only once before when she was 16, and her mother had found a note she'd written to a place, friend that said more than it should have. Everything flat, everything stripped of performance. "What is this?" her mother said. Claire set down the detergent. She turned. "Household accounts," she said. "These numbers." Her mother's finger on the page. "This column. What does this mean?" The column was labeled Maddox Estate Unaccounted. It had been Claire's working total, the running sum of what she had documented, cross-referenced, and not yet legally confirmed. It was a large number. "It means I've been counting," Claire said. Her mother looked up. The silence in the laundry room had weight. "You went to see Greer." It was not a question. "Yes. You had no right." "I have every right." The words came out quiet, clear. The Lone Star account was designated to me. The insurance rider was designated to me. The Waco lot was recorded in my name. "Those aren't your assets to manage, Mom. They were Dad's gift to me, specifically, by name." She held her mother's gaze. "I have documentation of all of it. Greer has documentation of all of it, and I'm going to make sure it gets corrected." Patricia Maddox looked at her, really looked, in the way she had not looked in 14 months, as though the person in front of her had just reassembled into a shape she didn't recognize. "If you do this," her mother said, "it goes public. The court filing, I know. Your sister's name is attached to this family. She's in her senior year. She has a future." "I have a future," Claire said, and the quiet precision of those 4 words, the simple fact of them, landed in the room like something that had always been true and had never until this moment been said aloud. Her mother's jaw tightened. Something moved across her face that was not guilt. Guilt would have been simpler, but the harder, less comfortable expression of a woman who has managed a situation for so long she has stopped seeing it as wrong, and who is now being required to see it. The debts after your father died, Patricia started. I know about the debts. Claire kept her voice level. I've been managing this household for 14 months. I know exactly what things cost and what they were paid for and where the money came from. She thought of the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the new Acura, Danielle's tuition paid in full, while Claire's student loans sat untouched in a deferment she hadn't chosen. I'm not saying things weren't hard. I'm saying you solved hard things by taking what was mine. Her mother closed the notebook. She looked at Claire for a long time. What does Greer intend to do? She said finally. File a corrected estate accounting with the county court. Document the insurance claim. Pursue restitution on the investment account. And is there... Her mother stopped. Tried again. Is there any... Yes, Claire said. Full restitution. Documented. Filed. You agree to the terms and it's a private settlement. You don't agree and it goes to the court record. She held her mother's gaze. And you never again make arrangements regarding my future without asking me. That's the other term. The laundry room was very quiet. You sound like your father, her mother said. It was the most complicated sentence she had ever said to Claire simultaneously. A rebuke and a compliment and a grief, all three pressed together into 5 words. Good, Claire said. Her mother put the notebook down on the dryer. She left the room. Claire heard her footsteps go up the stairs, heard the bedroom door close, not slam, close the closing of a woman who has had something named that she cannot decide what to do with yet. Claire turned back to the laundry. She started the machine. Her hands were completely steady. Tomorrow Danielle was coming home from school. Claire had not told Danielle anything. That conversation was still coming. Danielle came home on a Friday, earlier than expected, through the back door with her key and her suitcase wheels loud on the tile, and she dropped her coat on the kitchen chair that had been the coat chair since they were children, and said something smells amazing before she had fully registered that Claire was standing at the counter with a expression that was not the usual one. What's wrong? Danielle said. Claire had thought about this. She had thought about it the way she thought about legal arguments, not what she wanted to say, but what was true and what could be proven, and what the other person needed to hear in what order to understand it. Sit down, she said. Please. Danielle sat. Her face had done the thing it did when she was actually paying attention, gone still. The performance layer dropped, the quick mind underneath showing itself. Claire had always known that mind was there. Danielle had simply never been required to point it anywhere difficult. She told her everything. The Lone Star account, the insurance rider, the commercial lot, the total, which she stated plainly without drama because drama was not what this moment needed. She told her about Greer, about Roy Desmond, about the documents. She told her about the conversation with their mother 3 days ago. Danielle listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, there was a silence of considerable length. How long have you known? Danielle said. The full picture about 3 weeks. Pieces of it longer. And you didn't, Danielle stopped herself. She was working through something. Claire waited. The tuition, Danielle said finally, with the careful voice of someone placing a word on ice and testing whether it holds. My spring semester. Yes. That money came from the Lone Star account. The first withdrawal. In February. Danielle's hands were on the table. She looked at them. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't. I mean, I knew things were tight. Mom said they were tight. I didn't ask too many questions because... She stopped. Because I didn't want to know, she said, with the flat honesty of someone who has just arrived at an accurate thing about themselves. That's what you're going to say. I wasn't going to say anything, Claire said. I'm telling you what happened. What you do with it is yours. Danielle looked up. Her sister's eyes, their father's eyes, the same dark gray were doing the thing Claire remembered from childhood, the thing Danielle almost never did in public, which was being completely unguarded. What do you need from me? Danielle said. It was such a direct question. Unadorned, no conditions. Claire hadn't expected it. and the not expecting it did something to the careful, structural calm she had been maintaining for 3 weeks. She pressed it back down. "Nothing right now," she said. "Greer is handling the legal side. When the settlement is finalized, there'll be documentation. It'll include your tuition payments. I'm not going after you for that. That's between you and Mom. Claire. Danny. Her name, just her name, without decoration. I need you to understand what happened. I don't need you to fix it." Danielle sat with that for a moment. Then, "She had me arrange my internship in Waco this spring," she said. "The one I told you about. She said it made sense, to be closer to home. She said," she stopped. "She said it would help with the household, that you'd appreciate the company." Claire looked at her. "She was trying to set up a second version of me," Danielle said slowly, and the understanding moving across her face was the specific expression of a person who is seeing a mechanism for the first time after having been inside it. "In case you left, or in case I stopped being useful," Claire said, not bitterly, just accurately. Danielle's jaw tightened in the way their mothers never did not controlled, actually feeling it. "That's Claire. I know. What are you going to do after the settlement? Where are you going to go?" And that was the question that had been sitting underneath all of it, the one Claire had been not asking herself for 3 weeks because there had been too much else to address first. She looked at her sister. She looked at the kitchen, the new countertops, the farmhouse sink, the Sub-Zero refrigerator that her mother had wanted for 4 years and that had, it turned out, been purchased with Claire's money. "I'm going back to Austin," she said. "I'm going to call UT Law and ask what it would take to complete my degree. And I'm going to figure out how to use the commercial lot income to fund that while I finish." She said it simply, the way plans sound when they have been worked through thoroughly in the dark. That's what Dad wanted for me. The structures he built, all of them, they were for this, so I could do this. Danielle looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "I should have noticed. You were 22. I'm 23 now." "Yes," Claire said. "You are." It was not cruelty. It was the simple, honest geography of 2 women deciding, slowly and imperfectly, to see each other clearly. The settlement conference was on a Tuesday morning in Howard Greer's office. Claire arrived first. Her mother arrived 7 minutes later with Gerald Watts, who had the careful, slightly diminished energy of an attorney attending a meeting that demonstrates he had not done his job well. Danielle had asked to be present. Claire had said yes. She sat in the corner and said nothing, and kept her hands in her lap with the stillness of someone who has decided to witness rather than participate. Patricia Maddox sat across the table from her eldest daughter and a man who had been her late husband's attorney and did not look comfortable with any element of the arrangement. "The terms," Greer said, placing the document on the table, "are as follows." He read them. Claire had reviewed them 4 times. She knew every word. She watched her mother's face as Watts leaned over and spoke quietly in her ear, and she watched the small movements that told her what was happening inside a face that was very good at not showing things. The slight flattening at the corner of the eye, the controlled breath, the hand on the table that did not move but wanted to. Full restitution of the designated beneficiary accounts. Insurance rider claim processed immediately. No contest. Corrected estate accounting filed with the county clerk, including the commercial lot. Private settlement agreement signed by all parties. Binding. Her mother's pen moved to the document. It hovered. "Patricia," Greer said, in the voice of a man who has been waiting 14 months to say something he should have said on day 1, "your husband trusted me to protect what he left for his daughter. I failed that. I'm correcting it now. I'm sorry it took this long." The pen touched the page. Patricia Maddox signed. The silence in the office after had a different quality than the silence before lighter, or not lighter, but different. The way air feels different after a long pressure system finally breaks. Claire looked at the signed document for a moment. She felt something she had not expected to feel, not triumph, which was too loud, too sharp for what this was, but the quieter particular feeling of a weight that has been pressing on you so long you forgot what it felt like not to carry it, finally lifting. Just that. Just the absence. "Thank you," she said to Greer. Don't thank me, he said. I'm 14 months late. She called Ben Hartley that evening. She had run into him twice since Lark's coffee shop, once at the county records office, where he had been reviewing infrastructure permits, and she had been pulling deed records, and they had spoken for 20 minutes about the warehouse district's development history with the ease of two people who find the same things genuinely interesting and are surprised and pleased to have found each other. The second time, he had stopped her on the street outside the records office and said, "Without preamble, you look like someone who's in the middle of something important," and she had said yes, and he had said, "I hope it goes the way it should," and that was all. Just the honest wish of a man who didn't overclaim. She called him and said, "It went the way it should." A pause. She could hear him smile. "Good," he said. "I wanted to tell someone who would just be glad, without any context required." "I'm glad," he said, simply, without decoration. "Do you want to get dinner?" She looked at the window of her childhood room, the twin bed, the shelf of books she was going to take with her to Austin. "Yes," she said, "but not here. Somewhere that isn't Waco." "There's a place in Austin I like," he said. And the way he said it, not "I know Austin" or "let me show you," but "there's a place I like." Casual, offering without performing, was the right thing in the right register, and she felt again what she had been careful not to feel too quickly, the specific and unfamiliar vertigo of being seen by someone who has no investment in a smaller version of you. "I'm going to Austin anyway," she said. "I have an appointment at the law school." "A beat. Yeah?" His voice held honest interest. "Tell me." She told him. She heard, on the other end, the quality of a man who is actually listening, not waiting for his turn, not calibrating his response, just receiving what she's saying as the actual thing she means. "Good," he said when she finished. Yeah, good. That is possibly the least articulate response anyone has given me today," she said. "I'm an engineer," he said. "I'm better with load-bearing structures than with words." "What's the load-bearing structure of what you just said?" A pause. "Then, that you should do it. That you're going to be very good at it. That I'd like to be around to watch." He said it quietly, without pushing. If that's agreeable. The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere in the November dark, Texas was doing what Texas always does, enormous and indifferent, and full of its own weight. Claire sat on the edge of the twin bed in the room that had been hers since she was 7, and that she was leaving, finally, for the last time, with her father's documents and her grandmother's insurance policy, and a signed settlement agreement, and a commercial lot in the warehouse district that was hers unencumbered and already earning. "It's agreeable," she said, and meant it. She left on a Saturday. Not dramatically, there was no scene, no final confrontation, no speech she had been composing for months, and finally delivered at the door. The moving was practical. She had rented a small trailer, the kind that hitches to the back of a car, and she loaded it herself over 2 mornings with the methodical efficiency of a woman who had been organizing other people's spaces for 14 months and knew exactly how to make things fit. She took her father's travel chest, the box of his books she had kept back from the storage run, the legal notebook and the filing case she had built over the past 3 weeks, the 6-year-old laptop from law school, which she would replace with the first installment of the settlement restitution. 4 boxes of personal belongings that together constituted everything she had actually wanted in the house that had held her, the rest having accumulated without her choosing it, the slow sedimentation of someone who had stayed too long in a room that wasn't hers. Danielle helped carry boxes. She showed up at 7 in the morning without being asked and without explaining herself, which was its own kind of statement. And she carried boxes to the trailer with the focused energy of a woman doing penance, though Claire had not asked for penance and didn't want it. She wanted something simpler, the ordinary labor of one person helping another, offered without scorekeeping or narrative, just because it needed doing. "The internship," Danielle said, loading the last box. "In Waco. I'm going to tell Mom I want to do it in Dallas instead." Claire looked at her. "That's your call." "It should have always been my call." Danielle's jaw had the set it got when she had made a decision and was stating it rather than asking permission. "I'm telling you so you know, not asking you to handle it." "Okay," Claire said. A pause. Then Danielle said, "The Third Monday Society." "What?" "Whatever you build," Danielle said. "When you're done with law school and you're helping people the way you're going to help people." She stopped, looked slightly self-conscious, pressed on. "I want to know about it. I want to be told." It was effortful, but it was real, and Claire recognized the difference. "I'll tell you," she said, and meant it as a kindness, not a promise she would have to manage. Her mother did not come outside when the trailer was loaded. Claire went back in to get her coat and found her mother in the kitchen, the renovated kitchen, the one with the countertops Claire had chosen, the sub-zero refrigerator. Her father's money had paid for sitting at the island with her coffee and her hands around the mug, and the expression of a woman who has been waiting to see whether something was going to happen, and has just confirmed that it is. Claire picked up her coat from the hook by the back door, the hook she had put in herself 18 months ago, with a level and 2 screws, because there hadn't been one and she'd been tired of coats ending up on the floor. "I'll send my new address," she said. Her mother looked at her, really looked, the way she had not looked in a long time, not at the function, the management layer, the useful daughter who had been such an efficient machine for so long, but at the actual person standing in the back doorway of the house they had shared for 32 years. "I know I owe you more than money," her mother said. It was not an apology, it was not close to one, but it was the first fully true sentence she had said to Claire in a very long time, and Claire stood with it for a moment and let it be what it was, neither more nor less. "You do," Claire said, not harshly, just accurately. She put her coat on. She went outside. She got in her car. She did not cry until she was past the Waco city limit, and then only for about 90 seconds, because she was practical and there was a trailer she needed to navigate on the highway, and because the crying was not grief exactly, but the specific release of something that has been held under pressure for so long that releasing it feels physiologically enormous. And then it was done, and she was driving, and the November Texas sky was doing its vast flat thing all around her, and she felt for the first time in 14 months, unencumbered. The UT Law School admissions coordinator was a woman named Lena Park, who had the efficient warmth of someone who has spent years shepherding complicated people through complicated processes and has made peace with the complexity. She met with Claire on a Monday morning in a small office on Dean Keaton Street. "You were 2 semesters from finishing," Lena said, looking at the transcript. "Your grades were—" She looked up. "Your grades were excellent." "I know," Claire said, because she did. She had been good at it. She had been good at it, and she had left anyway, because someone had to, because the structure had collapsed and she was the one standing closest to the gap. "What happened?" "Family circumstances. They've been resolved." Lena looked at her for a moment, the specific assessment of a person who has heard family circumstances many times and knows the range of what it can contain. Whatever she saw in Claire's face must have been sufficient, because she moved on. Re-enrollment for the spring semester would require. She ran through the list. Claire had already run through it herself. She knew what it required. She had the settlement documentation, the deed for the commercial lot, the insurance payout cleared, and in a separate account she had opened herself, in her name only, at a bank in Austin. "I can meet all of those requirements," Claire said. She was re-enrolled by the end of the week. She found the apartment on Speedway, a second-floor 1-bedroom with a proper desk and a window over the street and enough wall space for the shelves she intended to build. The lease was in her name. She signed it with the full, deliberate signature of a woman who knew exactly what she was writing, and she read every page before she signed, every clause, every paragraph, the way she intended to read every document she would ever sign again for the rest of her professional life. Martha, she did not have a Martha, but she had Ben Hartley, who drove up from Waco on the moving weekend with his truck, and helped her carry furniture, and did not talk when she was being quiet, and did not ask what she was thinking, and brought coffee without being asked when she'd been at it. 3 hours. "You're doing the thing again," he said, handing her the cup. "What thing?" "The thing where you're completely still but something is moving very fast inside." She looked at him. He was standing in the center of her mostly empty apartment with the easy presence of a man who is comfortable in a room that is not yet arranged. "I'm thinking about my father," she said. He nodded. He didn't try to fill that. He knew I'd be here. she said. Not here specifically, but here, doing this. He built things so I could get here, even if everything else went wrong. And everything did go wrong. And she stopped. I'm here. Ben said nothing for a moment. Then, what would he make of the apartment? She looked around the empty room, the good light, the shelf wall, the desk she had placed to face the window. He'd want to know the square footage, she said. And whether the lease terms were favorable. She felt the corner of her mouth move. And then he'd say it looked like a good place to work. It does, Ben said. He looked at her. It looks like yours. She pressed one hand to the wall, the white plaster wall of an apartment that was hers, that she had signed for and paid for and chosen, and was standing inside for the first time. It was hers. It was entirely, unequivocally, legally, and in every other sense, hers. Yeah, she said, it does. The Reading Society, the equivalent of the one she had imagined, the thing Mrs. Caldwell would have said some of us noticed about, began the following spring, 3 months after her re-enrollment, and it began not as a grand project, but as a Tuesday evening at the UT Law Library where Claire had offered, through the Women's Law Student Association, to explain estate documentation to anyone who wanted to understand it. 11 women came. 2 of them were law students. 4 were undergraduates. 3 were older graduate students, staff, 1 woman from the neighborhood who had heard about it through her niece and arrived with a folder of documents she had been unable to parse for 2 years. Claire stood at the front of the room and she did not lower her eyes for any of it. She explained beneficiary designations. She explained executor authority and its limits. She explained how to read a will and what to look for when you suspected something was missing. She explained what co-executor meant and what happened when only one of them acted. The woman with the folder sat very still the whole time. At the end, she came to Claire and said, I think someone took something from me, and I didn't know I could say so. Claire gave her Howard Greer's card and the name of a legal aid clinic, and told her to call them both. She did not tell the woman it would be easy. She told her it was possible. That was the more useful truth. The commercial lot in the Waco warehouse district, now held in a management trust she had set up with Greer's assistance, generated enough monthly income to cover her tuition and her rent and leave a small margin. It was not wealth. It was sufficiency, which was its own kind of power, the power of a woman who does not need anyone's permission to stay or go. She finished her degree the following December. The December after that, she passed the Texas bar. Howard Greer, who had attended both occasions with the satisfied expression of a man doing penance in installments, said at the bar celebration, Your father would have times and stopped, because his voice had done something unexpected, and he cleared his throat and started again. He knew, he said simply. From the first time I met you, he knew exactly what you were going to be. She had looked at him steadily and said, he just didn't want anyone to get in the way. The county record, McLennan County, Texas, filed with the clerk on a Tuesday in November, listed the corrected estate accounting of Douglas Roy Maddox, and named, as rightful beneficiary of designated accounts, commercial property, and supplemental insurance rider, his daughter, Claire Ann Maddox. It was, in the flat official language of public record, nothing remarkable. A name on a document, a correction to a filing, the kind of thing that sat in a database and was looked at mostly by attorneys and researchers and the occasional determined person who was trying to find out what had been taken from them. But it was there. It was permanent. It was true. And Claire Ann Maddox, driving down South Congress Avenue on a December afternoon with the Texas sun cutting low and gold through the windshield and Ben Hartley in the passenger seat asking whether she wanted the Tajano station or the NPR, had signed every document in the chain that led to it, read them all first, every word, every clause, every paragraph, and had never once let anyone hand her a pen before she was ready. Some stories end with the woman being found. This one ended differently. It ended with Claire Ann Maddox, licensed attorney, sole owner of a 1-bedroom apartment on Speedway Avenue, beneficiary of everything her father had built to find her, pulling into a parking space outside a coffee shop on South Congress, cutting the engine, and sitting for a moment with her hands on the wheel in the good winter light, Not because she needed to compose herself, but because she had learned, slowly and deliberately, the difference between rushing toward a life and choosing to be in it. She was in it. She had not been made visible by anyone else's choosing. She had simply stopped agreeing to be invisible, stopped letting her signature appear on things she hadn't read, stopped carrying what hadn't been handed to her properly, stopped being the useful one, and become, at long last and by her own design, the only thing she had ever actually needed to be, herself. That was the only rescue that had ever mattered. I keep thinking about that detail, the coat hook. Claire put it in herself, 2 screws and a level, because there wasn't one and she was tired of things ending up on the floor. Nobody asked her to. Nobody thanked her for it. And when she left, she didn't take it with her, because it wasn't that kind of thing. But I wonder if her mother ever looked at it after she was gone. Here's what I can't stop turning over. The moment Roy Desmond's hand pauses over the keyboard. He knew. Not everything, but enough to feel the pause. How many people in that story knew enough to pause and kept moving anyway? What does it actually cost us? Those small pauses we don't act on. If this one sat with you, I'd really like to know which moment did it. Drop it in the comments. I read all of them.